I'm John Heilemann.
And I'm Mark Halperin. And with all due respect to Mike Huckabee and his devotion to pork chop on a stick, it's really not, and it shouldn't be, what's for breakfast.
I like pork chop.
Mega greetings from St. Ambrose University here in Davenport, Iowa. John and I are in Iowa now, straight through the weekend into next week. 21 of the 22 major presidential candidates are in this state between now and next week, crisscrossing the state in all part of Iowa. They're here primarily for the state fair that's in Des Moines, where we will be, and most of the candidates will be over the next few days. The fair started today. We're here in Davenport because Jeb Bush did an event today on foreign policy. More on that in a bit. Jeb will be at the soapbox tomorrow. Again, almost all the candidates will be. John, major week here in Iowa. No straw poll this year, but the fair has drawn almost everybody to this state, not just to the fair, as we said, but all over. Tell me one thing you're looking for during this weekend here in Iowa.
Well, first of all, I think the fact that there's no straw poll just makes the fair even bigger. The fair is big, but it's bigger this year. I'm looking on the Republican side. I'm really going to be looking forward to seeing Scott Walker at the fair on Monday. I think, he's now, according to CNN ORC, he's slipped back to third place in Iowa after having been in first place all year long. He's taken a beating at the hands of both Donald Trump and Ben Carson. This state is as close to a must-win for him as anyone has a must-win. So him coming in here now, trying to pick up ground, reconnect with Iowa, I want to see how well he does.
I think Walker does have a big challenge because he was too low-key in the debate, and breaking through at the fair is hard to do. Breaking through in this state when there's so many people here. The thing I'm looking for relates to that is Trump. Well, Mr. Trump is going to the fair tomorrow.
Do you think he'll break through?
He'll break through. He's bringing his helicopter that says Trump in order to break through. Yeah. Still some question about whether people are going to get free rides, but Trump dominates no matter what. Two of the campaigns here, Republicans already said to me today, of course Trump's going to dominate the weekend. My question is, does anyone try to get into the storyline, or do they just basically say, if Trump brings his helicopter to the fair, surrender?
He's flying a helicopter into Des Moines. He's going to get off the helicopter and go stand with the butter cow. Okay, you were going to see the picture and footage of Trump and that butter cow for 48 hours straight, wall to wall on cable. There is no
Trump
breaking.
And cow, Trump and copter.
There's no breaking through that. There's no way. Here's the other thing I'm going to be looking at on the Democratic side. Hillary Clinton's going to be here, and we're going to go up and see her at this wing ding dinner tomorrow night up in Clear Lake.
All the Democratic candidates.
She'll be there with all the Democratic candidates. It's weird, right? Iowa, the state that humbled her in 2008, is now the state she's counting on to stop Bernie Sanders. She's still got a lead here over Sanders. She's losing to him right now in New Hampshire, or at least she's slipping in New Hampshire. Suddenly, this is like her firewall. Who would have ever thought Iowa would be Hillary Clinton's early state firewall?
On the Democratic side, I'm looking at something also at that dinner, which is Bernie Sanders. The last cattle call in this state, right near here in Cedar Rapids, I thought Sanders had a pretty weak performance. I don't know if he was nervous. He told us before the dinner that he would be a little nervous. He was not at his best. I think if he comes in here and has head-to-head with her and the other Democrats, speaking at this dinner with Democratic activists, if he has a better night, I think he could start to do better in this state if he sends the message that the electricity and fire he's brought to other parts of the country, he can bring here.
Well, or on the other side of the coin, he's got an event in Boone, not that far from Des Moines, before he goes to the fair on Saturday. After these huge events on the West Coast, if he comes to Iowa and only a few hundred people show up, that could be a big blow to Bernie Sanders after having 25,000 people suddenly to have it all there, go out of the
Ben Carson drew a couple thousand people to a Des Moines rally, so it is possible to draw big crowds here. Pressure on Sanders.
To make some kind of a test. All right, let's move on to our next topic. It's the soapbox, okay? So of all the things at the Iowa State Fair, the thing that I think we all prize most, beyond the butter cow, beyond the pork chops on sticks and the fried
and the candidates wandering around namelessly.
Candidates everywhere. There's the soapbox. It's like Hyde Park Corner in London, Speaker's Corner. You get up, you give a speech, and then in front of anybody who happens to come or be passers-by, you take some questions, right? Everyone subjects themselves to it except for a couple candidates this time around. Mike Huckabee is the first one to go. He went this morning. Let's watch him.
This is called Q&A. That means questions and answers in your world, but for me it's questions and avoidance. You ask questions. I will try not to do anything that will end my presidential aspirations here today at the soapbox.
So that was Huckabee trying to do the soapbox. Martin O'Malley is going to be number 2. That's happening right around now. Everyone else is going to do it. So is this a quaint little Iowa tradition that's all cute and who cares? Or can this have a real impact on a candidate's fortunes?
The Des Moines Register sponsors this. Huckabee didn't get a lot of hard questions, as I understand it. Right. This is where Mitt Romney was asked about economics and said corporations are people too, my friend.
Was there?
Yeah, we were there. I
was there. We were there.
The soapbox is a special thing. The Register lets anybody ask questions. The format's very free and open, and it's one of the big testing grounds of how you handle hecklers, how you handle hostile questioners. I bet you that Democrats send a lot of hostile people.
Right.
2 people aren't doing this, at least 2. Right. Hillary Clinton is not subjecting herself to soapbox, and Mr. Trump, at least so far, is not subjecting himself to the soapbox.
That's the key thing that people forget about that Romney event. The guy who got him to say that was a critic. He was a heckler. Yeah. And most of these guys, even when they do town hall meetings, they're basically friendly crowds. Republicans go to Republican events, Democrats go to Democrat events. This is a place where the left-wing socialists can walk by and go after the Republican candidate or vice versa. That's a different level of jeopardy, and all the cameras are on them.
If you're interested in seeing how these candidates handle a very tough testing ground, go to the Des Moines Register website, look at the schedule. They're streaming all of these things live. It is really an unusual event, as you said, like Hyde Park Corner, and it is right out there. Not just tough questions often, but every political reporter in the states there watching.
Under the very hot sun with all the political reporters. It's a unique thing in our politics, for sure.
All right. A long way from here, there's a big political issue brewing, because for the last 3 days, China has been devaluating its currency in relation to the dollar. Since Tuesday, the Chinese currency has been lowered by 4.4%. That is the biggest the country has let it drop in decades. Now, skeptics, of course, say that this is meant to boost the country's exports to help its sagging economy, and this can clearly have an impact on America. Presidential candidates here are taking notice. This is the reaction that a few of the candidates have had so far.
How can we compete? They continuously cut their currency. They devalue their currency, and I've been saying this for years. They've been doing it for years. This isn't just starting.
Their people have accepted a repressive, totalitarian regime in exchange for economic growth. And so China's ability to keep growing is at the core of their power.
A little later in the show, we'll show you what Jeb Bush had to say about this issue when we talk to him here in Davenport. But, John, what effect do you think this Chinese currency devaluation could have on the presidential race?
It's fodder for the populace of the left and right. Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump will make common cause on this and accuse China of doing bad things to the U.S. by devaluing their currency, and it puts anyone who's in the center, Hillary Clinton, Jeb Bush, in a difficult place.
I have to say, Hillary Clinton talked about China and trade issues in the last campaign very aggressively. I actually think it can benefit Hillary Clinton and maybe Jeb Bush. Right. People who can talk about these issues in a sophisticated but accessible way, which she can do and I think Bush can do, actually do benefit, because most Americans recognize that we have an economic imbalance with China. Right. This is the latest incarnation of it, but what does it actually mean? I think that's the challenge for all these candidates going forward.
It raises the bar for those guys. If they do it well, it's a home run, but it's tricky, right? Because you have to basically try to explain complex international economics, and it's not actually a black and white issue. And so if you can get the gray right, you're in good shape. But if you're not good at doing the gray, you can really be a muddle.
Yep, absolutely. All right. We're going to have a lot more from our Iowa road trip here in Davenport, talking about Jeb Bush as well. The former chairman of the state Republican Party, Matt Strawn, is going to join us. But coming up after this, our conversation from a little bit earlier with Jeb Bush after this word from our sponsors. Welcome back to Davenport, Iowa. We're here at St. Ambrose University, where Jeb Bush participated in a forum sponsored by Americans for Peace, Prosperity, and Security. It's a series of events the group's doing with former Congressman Mike Rogers, both in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, elsewhere, to get people to focus, the candidates and the public to focus on national security. We're going to show you a little bit of the forum that Jeb Bush did, answering questions. But after the event, John and I caught up with him and asked him about a couple topics, Cuba and more. Can I just clarify something on Cuba? Yeah. Do you think it'd be too late for the next president to make the kind of changes you want to see if President Obama continues this?
No, because Congress is not going to lift the trade embargo, and so I think there's still leverage to be able to advocate reforms inside of Cuba to create a more free society.
What can happen in the interim that you'd be concerned about?
I don't know. I don't think Congress is going to change this, so the president can't unilaterally open up trade. If you eliminate that that, and you're taking all the leverage that exists for us to be able to create an environment where Cuba moves towards freedom. We're legitimizing a regime that will allow it to continue to repress its people. It's not the right approach.
And just to clarify, China, are you worried about the Chinese motives? Are you worried about the motives of the Chinese government and what they're doing?
Yeah, I'm worried about it. It wasn't an act of kindness to hack into the server that had 23 million files, some of which at least were required for security.
I was talking about on currency, though.
Oh, I think we have to wait and see how that plays out. There are significant challenges in the economy right now for China that could be the motivation for this. But also, this is if you see continued growth, then this is a provocative act.
Is it bad for American workers?
It's not necessarily bad for American workers if it relates to weakness in the Chinese economy, and that's the part that has to be answered.
Thank you.
So that's the kind of nuance from Jeb Bush we were just talking about on the China currency issue. Donald Trump knows that it's bad for American workers. Jeb Bush might be, might not be. What do you think about that?
It's populist versus establishment, right? Jeb Bush, whose father was an envoy to China, understands China's a complicated country. In the forum, he talked about China, and he understands the culture there. But I think you're right. At a time when populism is pretty riding high, can you afford to be nuanced on China that way?
I bet you a pork chop on a stick that Donald Trump is going to punch him in the nose for that over the course of the next 24 hours. First time Donald Trump gets in front of a camera, he's going to say, Jeb Bush thinks this could be good for American workers, and he's going to give it to him right there.
Mr. Trump, over to you.
Right, exactly. All right, so earlier there was the event where Jeb Bush talked in a moderated Q&A session, talked about foreign policy at some length, in some detail. One of the things that we found most striking was him talking about his brother's legacy and Iraq. So let's take a listen to that and then talk about it.
But isn't it also the case that had we not invaded Iraq in the first place, we wouldn't be dealing with this ISIS problem?
Look, who knows? That's just such a complicated hypothetical. Who knows? I can't answer that. I'll tell you, though, that taking out Saddam Hussein turned out to be a pretty good deal. And the surge put aside the need, faulty intelligence, the lack of a commitment to a secure Iraq at the beginning, which would have been helpful. Put that aside. I've been critical, and I think people have every right to be critical of decisions that were made. In 2009, Iraq was fragile but secure. Mission was accomplished in the way that there was security there, and it was because of the heroic efforts of the men and women in the United States military that it was so. And that is a fact.
Now, I'm not a big fan of gotchas and pulling things out of context, but that was a discussion of Iraq and his brother, and he did use that phrase, mission accomplished, in the middle of there. I think that might leave a mark.
Yeah, Democrats are already jumping on what he said, although I haven't seen anybody yet highlight the mission accomplished part.
Yeah.
But they're already saying he's yoking himself to his brother, he's being an apologist. I actually thought he was as strong today as I've seen him in talking about, in a nuanced way, the mistakes that were made, what he supports, what he doesn't. It's an impossible case to make because the fact is the last Republican president who engaged in an unpopular war was his brother. But I thought today he was confident and he said what he really believes about every issue in a non-stuttering way. The mission accomplished thing, though, I'm sure he wished he hadn't said.
I think tonally you're right. I think substantively, I think on the substance he's going to get picked apart for saying things like, the provisional agreement should have been renegotiated when in fact that was his brother's. The exit in 2011 was an agreement that his brother's administration struck. People were going to pick apart the facts that he used. But I think just in terms of not sounding like queasy, like he was about to vomit in the middle of an answer about his brother's legacy, he did better tonally.
Still a deck of cards to play, a hand to play rather. All right. Jeb Bush was also asked about civil liberties, national security, and enhanced interrogation techniques during the forum. Let's listen to that.
I believe that it was a mistake to repeal the metadata provisions of the Patriot Act, which took place this last year. There's not any evidence that I could find, and I've talked to a lot of people to assure that this is the case, that civil liberties were violated, that people's privacy was violated. I do think, in general, that torture is not appropriate. It's not as effective, and the change of policy that my brother did and then was put into executive order form by the president was the proper thing to do. I also would say that right after 9/11, we were attacked, and my brother and I'm not saying this because I'm a Bush, I'm saying this because I love this country just like everybody in this room. I'm proud of what he did to create a secure environment for our country.
Civil liberties versus national security is a broiling debate within the party, not just Chris Christie and Rand Paul. This is another case. That answer symbolizes that he is the adult in the room. That is a nuanced, center-right position on how to balance these things that I think if that is what he's selling, I don't know if the voters will buy it in the end, but that is what he's selling, nuance on these complicated issues.
Well, right now, Rand Paul, who's the most extreme exponent of the opposite position, is not getting much traction. So it doesn't seem like there's that big a market in the Republican Party right now. We know there's some libertarian part of the party that's upset about this, but I think he's safer ground taking this position than he would have been if Rand Paul had caught fire.
Yeah, no question,
in the last few
but he
months.
taled about civil liberties like something that he truly values, right? Not the way Chris Christie has taken to doing it, which is like throw all civil liberties out the window. And I thought, again, he makes it clear to an audience like this in a very reasonable format.
Right.
He understands the issues.
And, and he's also on enhanced interrogation. He is in a place that a lot of people will be sympathetic to. I am not, because I think it's torture in all instances. But his argument, which is, I don't think we need it anymore. I don't think we should have it anymore. But I won't rule out there could be some circumstance in the future in which it might be necessary. That's a position, that's a big majority position with the American public.
Yeah. He also pushed back on the questioner who suggested that the metadata gathering hasn't really stopped any terrorism.
Right.
And he said, well, I've talked to people directly involved, and they say better. It's a great tool to have. I do think that if he ends up running against Hillary Clinton, he's going to have a very tough time, or not tough time, but it'll be a challenge for him because she knows a lot. There's no one in the Republican field right now, with the exception of Lindsey Graham, who I think can stand toe-to-toe to him on this stuff because he's studied hard.
But it's not clear to me that he and Hillary Clinton will be in different positions on that substantively, and so that might not be a big issue between the two of them because she's not a civil libertarian dub on those issues.
All right. Coming up, we have a big discussion with the former chairman of the Iowa Republican Party, one of the organizers of this conference. We'll talk Jeb, we'll talk Donald, we'll talk all things Iowa with Matt Strawn right after this. I'm good.
Our guest today here on set in Davenport is former Iowa GOP chair and security national advisor for Americans for Peace, Prosperity, and Security, Matt Strawn. Matt, thank you for coming out. This is your event, in part. How do you think Jeb Bush did today?
I thought he did great. He had clear, crisp, concise answers as to where his stance is on key national security issues. And while some of the atmospherics surrounding the caucuses are of an entertaining variety, I think it's events like this, actually talking about substance, that will ultimately make the difference. So I appreciate Governor Bush being the fifth one we've done with candidates in Iowa thus far.
All the campaigns we talk to say, and it's reflected in some of the public polling too, national security has been an enduringly important issue for voters in this state, Republicans around the country. What do you think Republicans in Iowa want to hear? What do they want to see in their nominee in terms of national security ideas or credentials?
Yeah, and it goes back to the initial event of the caucuses and the Steve King Freedom Forum in January, where applause lines weren't immigration or social issues, but it was standing steadfast with Israel, calling radical Islam what it is. I think it's who will prosecute the war on terror aggressively.
How do you prove that, though?
Well, that's what we're going to find over the next 5 months, and that's one thing we're trying to do with these forums. Let's go beyond that. Okay, so you want to support Israel. You want to push back on Putin's aggression. How are you going to deal with a China economic partner that also is probably going to be our greatest national security threat for the next generation? So let's do these forums around the state and really drill down and make sure the next president is prepared on January 21st, 2017.
Taking off your national security hat and putting on your political hat, does it surprise you that that guy Jeb Bush is down where he is right now, according to these recent polls, down around 5% in Iowa?
It doesn't really surprise me. Right now, I think the race, probably 3/4 of Iowa caucus goers, they haven't decided who they're going to be with. Obviously, a lot of us are waiting to see, not if or when the Trump fever breaks this summer. But, remember 4 years ago when I was chair, we'd be talking about President Bachmann or President Perry at this point.
Also 4 years ago when you were chair, when Trump was thinking of running, you dealt with him some.
I did.
Do you think he can win the Iowa caucuses? Is there a scenario where he wins the Iowa caucuses or not possible?
Well, when you have a field of 17, it's tough to write anybody off because the threshold for victory is so much smaller. But I think with Trump, and the fair is going to be a perfect example of that, watch what they do with the people that are drawn to him. Are they trying to sign them up as precinct supporters? It's one thing to tell a pollster in August that, I like that he's sticking it to the man. It's another to actually stand up in front of your neighbors, people you go to church with on February 1st, and say, this is the guy I believe should be commander-in-chief.
So just to clarify, you do think he can win the caucuses?
I think that he has as good a chance as anyone right now.
Well, no. I mean, as good a chance as anyone?
Well,
I mean, does he have a better chance? He's currently ahead. He's got a lot of money. People know him.
He has 100% name ID, arguably an unlimited bank account. But the question is, can they turn these political voyeurs that are showing up at many of these events into traditional caucus goers? And I think that's something we're going to learn together.
The guy who had been the front runner for the entirety of 2015, Scott Walker, and run into every single poll, has now dropped down to third place according to the most recent polling. What explains that?
Well, that's a great question. I think Governor Walker's rise most of the year was drawn from two different groups. You know, establishment-minded, business economic conservatives who loved the fact that he took it to the unions in Wisconsin, but also strong support from Christian evangelical conservatives that appreciate he was faith-driven. But I think the crowd that really is agitated about what they see coming out of Washington, the anti-establishment mood, right now that energy is with Donald Trump. Some of that energy is with Ben Carson. But I think the Walker team, they understand it's a long slog. We're in Big Ten country. It's going to be at 3 yards in a cloud of dust for the next 5 months. So, you know, I wouldn't be, manning the lifeboats at all if I was Governor Walker.
It's hard to measure organization, even if you're somebody like you who's tapped in and understands down county precinct level. Right now, who are the 2 or 3 top organized candidates in this state?
Yeah, and that's one after effect of not having a straw poll, quite frankly. Nobody has to show their organizational cards until February 1st. Ben Carson has a surprisingly strong organization, I would think. Most people would be, if you go to a Republican event, odds are you're going to see a Carson campaign and a mirror image Carson super PAC signing up volunteers.
More than Trump, more than Walker, more than Cruz.
He had 2,000. I was just going to say he had 2,000 people in Des Moines this past weekend. Trump, again, the key is, are they turning the people showing up into actual volunteers? But when it comes to traditional organizing, Governor Walker has a robust organization, and even Governor Bush is solidly, quietly putting together the type of organization that you need to be successful.
We talked before about how Donald Trump's going to fly in on a helicopter and stand with the butter cow. He's going to get a lot of attention. Yeah. The rest of these guys, all of them, many, are going to be competing for attention. Talk about what you've seen in the past as being the best kind of soapbox strategy for the Iowa State Fair, how you break through.
Boy, the helicopter's a great start. It's going to be tough to top that. You know, in large part,
if you're not Donald Trump.
In large part, it's do no harm. Right. You know, don't drop a pork chop on the ground. Don't eat a corn dog in a way that, draws out ridicule. I don't know how you break through. I don't know how you're talking about there, Matt. I don't know what you're referring to. I don't know how you break through the Trump noise this weekend. But we'll see when we have Trump, Clinton, and Sanders Palooza converge on the concourse on the same day.
Loud rotor blades for Mr. Trump.
All right. Matt Strawn, thank you for coming. We're always happy to have you on the show. After the break, more from our roadmap through Iowa this weekend. Next.
Tomorrow night, right back here in Iowa, we'll be live from Clear Lake with all the latest from the Iowa State Fair, plus conversation with the Democratic candidate and former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley ahead of that big Democratic dinner featuring Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, O'Malley, and others.
And we'll have our corn dog eating contest. Now, remember, we are on twice a day at 5 and at 8. We're live 24/7 on BloombergPolitics.com. Until tomorrow, sayonara.